Ever feel like you're drowning in research? When you just need the core insights without all the jargon.
That's where we come in. This is the deep dive, where we unpack complex topics and bring you those golden nuggets of knowledge.
And today we're tackling assessment and evaluation in instructional design, two terms that often get used interchangeably.
But trust me, they are not the same thing.
So let's clear that up right off the bat. What's the distinction?
Think of it this way. Assessment is like taking a snapshot of where a student is at a specific moment in their learning. Like, are they grasping this particular concept?
Okay, so it's a progress check.
Exactly. Evaluation, on the other hand, zooms out to look at the effectiveness of the entire instructional program. Did it achieve what it set out to do?
So assessment is the individual check-in, evaluation is analyzing the whole roadmap.
You got it. And whether you're a teacher, a curriculum designer, or just curious about learning, understanding that difference is super important.
Absolutely. So let's delve into the world of assessment a bit deeper. What types of assessments are we talking about here?
Well, think of it like a three-legged stool. You need all three for it to be sturdy, right?
Right.
Same goes for instruction. We've got our formative assessments. These are like your checkpoints along the way, quizzes, class discussions, even peer reviews.
So it's less about grades and more about understanding what's clicking and what needs more attention, both for the student and the teacher.
Precisely. You're giving feedback during the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have your summative assessments, your big exams, projects, the ones that measure overall mastery of the material.
So formative assessments are like taking the pulse. Summative assessments are checking the overall health.
Great analogy. But wait, there's one more leg to the stool.
Okay, hit me.
Diagnostic assessments. These happen before the learning even begins. It's about figuring out a student's strengths, weaknesses, any prior knowledge they bring to the table.
Like a pre-game warm-up. You wouldn't just
Yeah.
jump into a marathon without knowing your baseline fitness, right?
Exactly. Now, how does all this tie into evaluating an entire instructional program? Well, that's where models like ADE come in.
ADI. Sounds like some sort of high-tech teaching assistant.
Ha! Not quite, but I like your thinking. ADI stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and of course, Evaluation.
And today, we're diving deep into that evaluation phase.
Right, and within evaluation, we have, again, different approaches. Formative evaluation happens during the design and development stages of a program.
So that's like getting feedback on a rough draft before you send it out into the world.
Exactly. And then you have summative evaluation, which happens after the program is implemented. Did it work? Did it meet its goals? What can we learn from it?
It sounds like a constant cycle of improvement, kind of like how software developers use feedback loops to refine their products.
You've got it. A good evaluation plan is critical for creating truly effective learning experiences. But even with the best models and assessments,
We need to make sure those assessments are actually, good.
exactly, that they're well designed and serving their purpose. We're talking validity, reliability, practicality, the cornerstones of effective assessment.
Okay, let's break those down. What makes an assessment valid?
Think of it like a map. A valid assessment accurately measures what it's supposed to measure. It aligns with your learning objectives. If you want to assess problem-solving skills,
A multiple choice test probably won't cut it.
exactly, you'd need something more authentic, something that actually requires problem-solving. Then there's reliability. Does the assessment produce consistent results under similar conditions?
So if you took the same test twice, you should get similar scores, right?
Precisely. And lastly, we have practicality.
Which, in the real world, is crucial.
Absolutely. The assessment needs to be doable within the constraints of the classroom or learning environment.
Makes you realize there's a lot more to designing effective assessments than meets the eye.
Yeah.
It's like assessment design is its own deep dive. We've got valid, reliable, practical. What else makes an assessment truly effective?
Well, just like exploring a shipwreck, effective assessment is ongoing. We're talking continuous feedback, not just a one-time test at the end.
Right, so it's more integrated, woven throughout the learning journey.
Exactly. And that's where collaboration comes in. Remember those formative assessments, peer feedback, group projects. Those are great for assessment and for deeper learning.
Love that. It's like students become co-explorers, learning from each other.
Exactly. And teachers benefit too. They get insights into how students are thinking and can adapt their teaching. But probably the most important thing is aligning assessments with learning outcomes.
That seems obvious, but I'm sure it's easy to get caught up in cool assessment methods and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Oh, absolutely. We need to remember the why behind the how. Assessments should reflect what we want students to be able to do.
So it all comes back to creating that cohesive learning ecosystem assessments as tools for growth.
Exactly. Now, while assessments are great, we also need to be aware of potential downsides.
Every deep dive has its considerations, right?
Mhm.
What are some challenges with assessments?
One big one is the impact on student motivation. Too much pressure, too many high-stakes tests that can actually hinder learning.
Like being underwater too long, you need to come up for air. How do we prevent assessment from becoming overwhelming?
Be mindful of the overall assessment load. Make sure it's appropriate. We want to create a supportive environment where it's okay to make mistakes.
Right, foster that growth mindset. Mistakes help us learn and grow.
Absolutely. And we need to be realistic about resources. Creating grading assessments, especially those rich, authentic ones, takes time and energy.
It's like planning an expedition. You need the right equipment and crew to be successful.
Exactly. Teachers need support to implement meaningful assessments without getting burned out.
It's a balancing act for sure. So we've talked a lot about traditional assessments, but what about the future? Any exciting new trends on the horizon?
Oh, tons. The world of assessment is bursting with innovation. One thing I'm particularly excited about is technology integration.
Had a feeling you might say that. Technology is revolutionizing everything. Education's no exception. Like,
Yeah.
what's technology doing for assessment?
Well, for one, we're seeing the rise of adaptive learning platforms. Imagine software that can personalize a student's learning experience in real time, adjusting difficulty, providing tailored feedback.
Wow, that's like having a personal tutor built right into the software.
Exactly. No more one size fits all. And get this, AI is becoming increasingly important for analyzing assessment data.
Oh yeah, AI is everywhere these days. How's it being used in assessment?
Well, it can process huge amounts of information about student performance, way more than any human could handle, and spot patterns, identify areas where students might be struggling.
It's like having an extra set of eyes, or maybe even a whole research team, helping us make sense of all that data. Are there any other trends you're excited about?
Definitely. There's a big push for what's called authentic assessment. Remember how we talked about aligning assessments with learning outcomes? Authentic assessment really takes that to the next level. We're talking about asking students to apply their knowledge in real-world situations.
So less about memorizing facts and formulas and more about actually using what they've learned.
Exactly. Like imagine you're teaching a biology class. Instead of just having students label a diagram of a cell, you could have them design an experiment to test the effects of different variables on cell growth.
Now that's what I call hands-on learning. It makes it so much more engaging for the students too.
Absolutely. And speaking of engagement, another trend I'm really excited about is the growing emphasis on collaborative and peer assessment.
We touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth diving into a bit deeper. There's something so powerful about students learning from each other, giving each other feedback.
Totally. It shifts the dynamic from the teacher being the sole evaluator to a more collaborative approach.
So it's not just about evaluating what they've learned, but also about helping them develop those essential collaboration and communication skills that are so important in, well, pretty much every aspect of life.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into assessment and evaluation.
We have. From the basic definitions to some really cutting-edge trends. As we get ready to resurface, is there one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember?
You know, if I had to sum it all up, I'd say this. Effective assessment isn't just about figuring out what a student knows at a particular moment in time. It's about creating opportunities for growth, for deeper learning, for students to really take ownership of their education.
It's about empowering them to become lifelong learners.
Exactly.
And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of assessment and evaluation. We hope you've surfaced with some new insights and renewed appreciation for the power of effective assessment. Until next time.